Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Station 11, Episode 1. It's called Wheel of Fire. I'll start spoiler free because it is an Episode 1. This is a limited series on HBO Max, and it is a post-apocalyptic tale which kind of spans multiple timelines. It's about a deadly flu that sort of wipes out most of humanity, and we kind of follow it happening. And this first episode is largely just like the present day. Well, it depends what you count as present day in the context of the show, I suppose. But, it's the recognizable world at the outbreak, with little glimpses of the future, the past, that kind of thing. So I'll get into my thoughts and feelings. This was high on the Patreon vote for priority of checking out pilots this month. And it's actually a couple of weeks old, but people insisted that I should go back and check this one out. It stars Mackenzie Davis, who is from the last Terminator movie, but more notably for me, she was in possibly the best ever episode of Black Mirror, San Junipero. That said, though, she is barely in this first episode. This is kind of like Queen's Gambit episode 1, and that, like, obviously Anya Taylor-Joy is the big draw of that show, but she's not really in that first episode outside of a brief glimpse, because it's, backstory, it's setting up stuff with a different part of the timeline. So, the main gist of this first episode is we're introduced to a character named Jeevan, or Jeevan, if I'm saying that right, and he is at a play, I think it's in Chicago, and an actor has a heart attack on stage, which kind of starts this turmoil, and he ends up kind of looking out for this little girl who's in the play, this little actress named Kirsten, and as the episode plays out, more and more signs that this stuff is going on around the world, that this flu outbreak is happening, kind of comes up as he's trying to help this little girl get home because she's been abandoned by her handler, or the wrangler, as she says the person who's like there to look after the kids in the play are called. So it's kind of this awkward relationship of this sort of awkward guy who is a little bit temperamental in some ways. He does seem to have the best of interests, generally speaking, but he's a bit socially... Just I've said awkward already, but he's a bit, a bit quiet, a bit introverted, but he's trying to do his best to sort of make sure this kid, this little girl, is safe and gets home. And that's kind of our framework of the episode. But as he goes on this journey and gets roped into actually taking her on the train to her house, he gets a call from his sister who works at the hospital and is told, a number of things. So I'm not in spoilers yet, but this is just the premise of the show. So I don't think it's a spoiler to say that she tells him that there's a flu outbreak happening and that he has to go get supplies, go to his brother, and barricade the door. It's kind of like she's already seen it coming, that there's like this pandemic, this big cataclysmic things happening. So yeah, obviously people recommended this, people are really hyped for me to go back and check this out, and I suppose at the moment of truth, what did I think of Station 11? And honestly, I'm kind of mixed on it. I'm a little in the middle, and it's not necessarily all the show's fault per se. It's not like a quality question. I do think there's some good direction in here. I do think it handles some of the moments fairly well. My favorite thing about it, honestly, is probably the transitions. There's a lot of these transitions in the show where it'll stay in the same shot of a location in the post-apocalyptic future. It looks very Last of Us, right, with all the wildlife starting to kind of sprout again, but it'll cut to like the present day, and it'll be like, it'll be the theater at the start of the episode. You see like the theater with just all of the leaves and all of the bushes and stuff and everything growing, and then it just cuts to the theater full of people quietly watching a play, and it's kind of like the stark like contrast. So I think I have two main reasons why I was having a hard time really connecting with this, because it's not fundamentally doing anything wrong, and I would say that the little girl actually, Kirsten, I think she's actually quite a good actress for her age, and was a good counterbalance to Jeevan, who is a bit neurotic in some ways, and but yeah, so the two big things that I think are going against it, one is just the premise and the timing of the world. This episode has characters talking about a flu, a pandemic, the CDC are brought up, there's people wearing face masks, people are scared that the world, all of this stuff going on and being scared of, like, particularly, I think it's particularly the parts where the main character doesn't want to be close to someone else, or he doesn't let someone into the elevator because he doesn't want to risk catching it. And I think when those subject comes up, the idea of being scared of the virus spreading, of the flu spreading, I don't really want to watch a story about this right now, especially something that is so. And I'm sure like it goes away from that as it goes on, because we then transition into, the end of the episode kind of sets up what our two timelines are going to be. It seems like, anyway. And I imagine like after this first episode, the actual dealing with the pandemic stuff and the outbreak and try to contain the virus, I don't think that's going to be a big part of it going forward. So that's maybe not a long-term problem, but it did make this first episode a little bit weird to get into, because I'm like, I don't really feel like I want to deal with these subjects right now. This is a little too real life. It's sitting a bit too close to home. And then the other problem that I kind of had, which I think is a bit more of a traditional problem, is that it feels a little derivative, especially in recent times. I mentioned Last of Us with talking about the visuals of the post-apocalyptic world. That rings true. But even the fact that we have a man and a little girl who kind of like are going to be companions and have to, the man's going to have to reluctantly look out for this kid that he doesn't really know that well. That is a bit of a trope at this point in post-apocalyptic stories. Like obviously Last of Us comes to mind again. The video game for The Walking Dead was kind of this setup with a guy and a little girl. Not quite the exact same thing, but similar vibe as The Road with Viggo Mortensen, and he's looking after his son in the post-apocalyptic world. It's definitely a bit of a trend and a bit of not even a trend, more of a trope at this point in post-apocalyptic stories. So I couldn't help but feel a little bit tired of some of the plot ideas that it was playing with. The end of the episode, which kind of sets up that it is going to be like him and the kid in this world, sometime after the post-apocalypse has happened, and they're going to be having this journey to get somewhere. I was like, okay, I've been here, I've done this, I've cared about this a lot in the past, and you're not doing anything bad. There's some good moments in here, there's some good performance moments, some good moments of direction, but on a fundamental level, I've done this too many times at this point. And I was finding myself really disconnected from what was happening, because I was just kind of, okay, we're doing this exact thing kind of again. And it's not that it's not putting its own spin on it, it's just, it almost felt like it needed some sort of other hook, and it kind of has a little bit of a hook. There's a stylistic thing it does with the title Station 11. What that actually is in the story is a comic book that someone has written. And it's not even like a prominent character based on this first episode, but they may get more flashbacks and we might learn more about them, and they'll become prominent in one of the timelines as it goes on. And in this first episode, they felt relatively just there to introduce the comic for the most part, but I'm sure that's something that might evolve in the ongoing story. And there's a couple of little things. There's a thing towards the end of the episode with that I thought was a very interesting stylistic choice that I really kind of dug. And maybe that's the sort of thing where if it goes into that more, like I could see the appeal. And if, maybe people tell me that that's going to be a big thing. I'll talk about it properly in a minute in spoilers, but maybe that would be a hook for me. But it did kind of feel like it was missing an extra something that felt unique to this show, unique to this version of this story. And maybe even just something else to make me root for the main character a little bit. And it's not that he doesn't have the hero moments, because he does, like, he goes out of his way to make sure this kid's okay. He makes a couple of sketchier choices later in the episode, which give him some layers, and he's not just this noble goody two-shoes. He does have some faults. He does make a choice that's maybe questionable, but also might be the right choice from a pure cold, logical perspective in the moment. There's a lot of things that the character has in the episode to give him like stuff. But I think one of the weird things is that the episode starts off on this really vague note with him, where it kind of he notices this actor on stage is having a heart attack, and no one else realizes yet. Everyone else just thinks he's acting. And it turns out that he's not actually a doctor or even someone who knows first aid. He just recognized that he was having a heart attack, and that seems like something the show's going to go into. Is like, why did he tell this before anyone else? Is it just because he suffers from panic attacks and he recognized something similar, or is there more to it than that? I don't know. But it kind of like sets you off on this vague note where everyone kind of like just like his girlfriend just sort of leaves without him. Everyone around him just doesn't want to talk to him except the kid. The kid's the only one who kind of gives him any time, and I'm sure thematically that's important. I'm sure thematically it feels like an intentional choice, but it did kind of make it a little tough as a first episode to really be behind this character. And I don't think he's far off from being. I don't think he's far off from being super likable. He's like just slightly off because he does have all the other elements. He makes the right choices. He's doing things for the noble right reasons, but he has flaws. Like all of these elements are there, but there's just something about him that feels a little bit vague and a little non-committal at this point that I just couldn't quite latch on to him as a character. I think the kid, because she's just this blunt kid who. And she's one of those kids in like TV shows and movies where she's a little smart for her age. She's only 8, but she's very quiet for an 8-year-old. Maybe that's just a generation these days because they all have smartphones. I don't know, but her performance worked for me, and you know, I also don't think it's a spoiler to say that this little kid is the kid version of who Mackenzie Davis is playing, who we get a glimpse of at one point in the episode, but that's kind of setting up for the future. So I don't really get to sample any of Mackenzie Davis stuff in this episode, really, other than just the idea that we're going to see her, and here she is. So yeah, definitely a bit mixed on this, and it's not mixed because it's like a train wreck or anything like that. It's very frustrating the way I'm mixed on this because I want to like it, and it's kind of like doing some smart things with its storytelling. But some moments just feel a little bit like they're going through the motions, and I feel like I've seen similar moments in similar stories where we're doing this beat of where a character realizes they have to make a cold choice, or we're doing this beat where they have to think of themselves and not someone else in a selfish way, or like, you know, like it does a lot of things. I will say there is a really cool moment towards the end that kind of like, because up until a certain point, even though there's some stuff in the background and the hospital seems like it's getting overrun, for the most part, it doesn't necessarily feel like we're on the brink of like disaster yet. And there's a big moment, your big sort of like budget moment towards the end of the episode that shows you, oh no, wait, things are really, really bad. And it convinces all the characters that this is really bad. It's a good moment to end on. So I would say that the ending's, the last like 3 minutes are probably the strongest of the episode. Because it kind of mostly made me forget about all my comparisons and all of my tiredness of the genre. But yeah, so is what it is. So I'll say spoilers so I can talk about the rest of the first episode. Now this is on like episode like 8 or something now out of 10, so this is like really far into its run. So people who like the show are way ahead of me at this point. So yeah, the episode has this thing with the comic book where you see some glimpses of it early on, and we know that Kirsten's got it. She was around when the actor had the heart attack, received it, I think from an ex-girlfriend or an ex-wife, or that was the vibe I was getting. And there's like a hint that he says that the guy in the cover's the asshole that ruined his life, but there's not much more to that. At the end of the issue, or the end of the episode, sorry, end of the issue. I'm talking about comic books, so I'm starting to talk in comic lingo. But at the end of the episode, we see Mackenzie Davis reading this comic. She still has it as an adult, and she's reading it in like, you know, it's not the snow-covered landscape that we see after the sort of the 80-day time jump just before it. You know, we jump far ahead into the future where she's an adult, but right before we see she's reading the comic book, we actually get like a live action version of what's in the comic book. We get like an astronaut on the space station, Station 11, and there's like hints where he's talking to like, the ship's computer, but there's not really much more than that. It's so quick that I didn't have a chance to take much more than that in. But it was like a confusing little moment, and then she's reading the comic, and I'm like, oh, okay, so are we going to like see like the version of what, are we going to see the comic book play out in snippets over the shows? Like the idea that she read this a lot growing up, that this became like a fundamental part of her character, and we're going to see how it plays out. That might be what it's doing. I don't think that Station 11, the comic and the show, is based on a real station and this is a real person up, you know, orbiting space. I mean, maybe it's not out of this world, but it felt a bit more science fiction than that. Whereas, because the show otherwise, other than the fact that it's a post-apocalyptic show, it starts off in what seems like the normal world. It's not like got laser beams and shit. So yeah, it's really frustrating because I do think this is a really intriguing stylistic choice, and like I said earlier, I really enjoyed the transitions between the time periods by and large. But I did groan at another part of the ending, which was when after the 80 days and they come out of the apartment where they've been eating all their groceries for that time presumably, and they're finally leaving and they're going on a trip. They say they're going to find I think they say a station actually. I think they use the word station. So maybe Station 11's got a bit of a double and triple meaning. But when they get outside and it's them two on their own and it's like everything's covered in the snow, it was hard not to think of, okay, well, now they're going on the journey, it's kind of Last of Us and all these other post-apocalyptic stories. And it's interesting that all the examples I gave were kind of like spread across different, mediums. I mentioned a couple of video games, a couple of movies, and at least one of those movies was based on a book. So these tropes in this type of storytelling are definitely like all over the place in terms of their coverage. But so yeah, I was kind of like feeling a little just tired of that when it happened at the end. What I did like towards the end though was the plane. So there's when he gets to his brother's apartment, and they're not really close because he's like surprised to see him, but he's like shown up with all these food, all this stuff, and his brother's not really accepting what he's telling him. He's like, sorry, sister says the world's going to end. Then she told me to come here and barricade the place, and obviously he's not really like taking him seriously to begin with. But then young Kirsten notices something, and they look out the window, and it's a plane which almost looks like it might even hit the building they're in to a point, but it sort of like swerves and it crashes into the pier. And it's a really well done moment. It looks good. It feels like big in a way that nothing else in the episode has felt big. So it really sells the how extreme it is because it feels like all of a sudden there's this big effect moment. So in a meta sense, it really feels like it's selling you on, no, this is a big deal, and it would be a huge deal to people who witness this because a plane is just falling out of the sky. And the effect here looked pretty good. The only thing that didn't look that great is when you look down at the crash and you see all the fire. As the fire looked good in the pier, the only thing that gave it away is that part of the plane was sticking out of the water, and the water around the plane kind of gave away the CG a little bit. But like other than that, it looked quite good. So yeah, as far as the rest of the episode, you have like all the trip. You have him on the train with the girl. You have him going to her house, but there's no one in. And it's kind of weird that her parents are like she can't contact them. Everyone's kind of abandoned her, but she does have parents, at least as far as we know. Maybe there'll be a reveal later that she was lying about like who she lives with or something. But it's notable that he has a big lie. He's being fairly nice and like doing the right thing and making sure this is not classed as a kidnapping the entire time. But he lies to her later on when she makes the choice, because he gives her the choice. It's like to either come with him to his brother's or go home. And she makes the choice to go home, and she starts walking, and it's it's the middle of the night, it's the city, it's freezing, and he's like, no, and he makes up a story. He says, I messaged your parents earlier, they finally got back to me, and they said that it's cool for you to come and stay with me and my brother, and they even know your brother a little bit from a work thing, and he really bluffs his way through it, and there's a lot of plot holes to his story here but you sort of, okay, she's an 8-year-old, she's not going to necessarily think of all these things right away. So that's kind of the big moment where he makes a choice where he thinks this is what's best for her in the moment, because he's at the point where he's starting to have a panic attack, or he's had a panic attack already, and he's kind of like almost over them now because he can't have more. Like he has like a moment in the store where he doesn't. He's like, I should be having a panic attack right now, but I already did that. I guess maybe that's the other thing, is like how much he believes this like so much from his sister. Like he's willing to like go and like doomsday prep immediately because his sister's told him this. And there's a moment when his sister's on the phone where she starts like reminiscing of like their childhood together, and I think that's the moment that sells him that this is serious, that this is not just like some her over worrying. Like she sounds like she's like reminiscing because she might not ever see him again. Like, and we see her coughing when we do actually meet his sister at the hospital soon after. So yeah. So yeah, I mean, it has these moments to sort of convince you of these things, and he has these little temper moments where he tells people to F off, or there's a decent moment where a guy who's clearly sick crashes his car and he's going to get out, and he holds the door shut and says, "No, don't get out of the car. I will call an ambulance for you, but don't get out of the car," because he knows that this guy's clearly sick. He doesn't want him opening the door and letting his air out into his breathing space. And those moments are fine. Those moments are fine, but they're kind of the topic that I'm not really in the mood for right now. But I think it being derivative of the post-apocalyptic genre is a valid complaint that it might get in the way of this. It's not that it's doing anything too bad. It seems like a fairly solid version of this type of story so far, and there is a little bit of a curiosity as to what the actual post-apocalyptic, now that it's got going, because this is very much a prologue episode. But I'm not I don't know if I've got it in me for this right now. But it's not bad. It's certainly not bad by any means. I don't want to shit on it. I just I've been here, I've done this, and it doesn't help that I just Why the Last Man was not that long ago. And it's not, that's a little bit different, but definitely the idea of some of the outbreak stuff and dealing with the crisis, there's definitely some parallels to draw. But it's not that much further back than that I was interacting with some of these other stories. So some of them I really like. Last of Us 1 and 2, I love those games. They're kind of the definitive version of this type of story for me. So this had a lot of stuff to do to kind of sell me on another one of these, and I don't know if it quite did. But it didn't necessarily make me say, no, I'm never watching more of this, but I'm not feeling a particular passion for it. So I think I'll leave it there. And you can let me know what you thought of the show. Most of the show's done now. It's got 1 or 2 episodes left, so let me know if what the rest is like. Now, without spoilers, but not just for me, but for others who might be interested in checking it out. But what is the rest of it like? Is it great? Is it better than this? Is it more unique? What does it do? I'm curious to hear that. So let me know in the comments, subscribe, all that stuff. Ding the bell for notifications. Helps us out a lot if you do that. Of course, if you want to support everything we do, head over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and you can support us for as little as $1 per month. And go have a look. So that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?